So welcome to the EAC's 2020 Elections Summit. The 2020 elections are already upon us. And I want to point out also that this is the 100th year that women have been given the right to vote. So we celebrate that amazing achievement. The Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary are just a few short weeks away, with dozens of states' primaries and caucuses not far behind. Ballots for military and overseas voters have already been sent for the New Hampshire primary, which means that the first votes in the 2020 elections have already been cast. Today, you will hear from election officials and other key election stakeholders across the country who are working tirelessly to ensure that the 2020 elections are secure and accessible, foster high public confidence in the integrity of the process and in the election results, and support a smooth and efficient voting experience for all who are eligible and who wish to participate. Today's diverse group of speakers include election officials from all levels of government, both those who are elected and those who are appointed. Election officials from large, medium, and small jurisdictions who serve populations ranging from 7 million to 70,000 registered voters. Election officials who have been working in the field since before the 2000 elections, and those who are newer to their roles, as well as representatives from key federal agencies who are supporting election officials as they prepare for and administer the 2020 elections. The conversation today will focus on several important topics in the field of election administration. Election security and foreign interference in elections are, of course, top of mind for election officials this year. Many of our speakers today will discuss efforts at all levels of government to strengthen U.S. election infrastructure and protect against new and evolving threats to our elections. We also want to highlight more nuts and bolts election administration issues that election officials are facing in the run-up to the 2020 elections. 3 of our 4 panels focus on issues including preparing for expected high turnout in November, ensuring accessibility for voters with disabilities and those with limited English proficiency, and overcoming election day and poll worker challenges in an ever-changing elections environment. Before I introduce our first speakers, I want to run through a few housekeeping items. First, we all encourage you to all follow and contribute to today's conversation on social media. The hashtag we're using for EAC activities this year, including today's summit, is hashtag 2020Focus. I would appreciate it if you would all please silence your cell phones. There will be opportunities throughout the day for audience members to ask questions of our panelists. And when doing so, we politely ask you to do 3 things. Speak into the microphone, state your name and affiliation, and importantly, please be brief and be sure to ask a question. Lastly, if you need anything throughout the day, please feel free to ask one of our staff members for assistance. EAC staff in the room, could you please stand up? We're happy to help you in any way we can. Let me once again say thank you to everyone who has joined us here today, and a big thanks to our staff at the EAC for pulling this event together. Today's event, we have for you to kick off today's event, we have for you a bipartisan pair of secretaries of state, Secretary Jim Condos of Vermont and Secretary Kyle Ardoin of Louisiana, the champion Louisiana LSU Tigers. I'm sure he's very happy today, who they will help set the stage for today's discussions. Both secretaries serve alongside myself and EAC Vice Chair Ben Hovland on the Elections Infrastructure Subsector Government Coordinating Council, or GCC. The GCC was established following the Department of Homeland Security's designation of elections infrastructure as critical infrastructure after the 2016 elections. The GCC enables local, state, and federal governments to share information and collaborate on best practices to mitigate and counter threats to election infrastructure. Secretaries Condos and Ardoin represent states that probably couldn't be more different in terms of how they run elections, but I know they share a common commitment to administering secure, accessible, and efficient elections. We've asked them here this morning to provide an overview of efforts in their states and at the national level to prepare for the 2020 elections. First up, we have Secretary Jim Condos. Secretary Condos has served as Vermont's Secretary of State since 2010 and was the president of the National Association of Secretaries of State during the 2018 midterm elections. He also serves on the EAC's Board of Advisors. Secretary Condos.
I hope my voice holds out. And I just want to state one thing. The University of Vermont football team is undefeated since 1974. Of course, it was canceled in 74. Good morning, and thank you, Chairwoman McCormick, for the introduction. The EAC has been a tremendous partner for all of us as we've entered this cycle. I am sure I'm not alone in being grateful for the incredibly quick turnaround that last year we experienced when the EAC received the money from Congress to distribute to the states. It's helping all of us to work better and smarter. I'd like to give, at this point, a nice round of applause for the EAC. Lately, every time I hear someone say, as we prepare for the 2020 elections, I'd like to remind you all, as Chairwoman McCormick did, they're already here. At least one state's already sent out its UOCAVA ballots. Vermont's actually start going out this Friday. And we have, in Vermont, we also have no excuse early voting, no excuse absentee voting that matches the UOCAVA deadline of 45 days. So folks, the election really is already here. Of course, as we all know, administering our elections and securing our election systems is a year-round job. I'm sure that many of us in this room never thought cybersecurity would be as front and center to our work as it is now. We now eat, sleep, and breathe cybersecurity. And for many of the states, 2016 was a wake-up call. I feel fortunate that in Vermont we started focusing on cybersecurity back in 2013. At the NAS conference in February of 2013, one of our colleagues, now Governor Kate Brown of Oregon, mentioned that her corporation system had been attacked. When I got back to Vermont, I checked with my IT director to ask him how our posture was, and he told me that he thought we were in pretty good shape, but it wouldn't be bad to get a second set of eyes on it. That's when we partnered with an independent vendor to do a risk and vulnerability assessment along with a penetration test of all of our systems. We now work on cybersecurity every day of the week. When we got the call from DHS Secretary Jay Johnson informing us of the foreign nation attacks that on our state election systems, our world changed. And even yesterday, we heard that Russia has now attacked in Ukraine, and we better all be on our toes. They're coming at us this year. To be honest, there was some hesitancy when he said that he was going to name or designate election systems as a critical infrastructure. We didn't know what that meant. And it took 6 months before we finally got the answer. Well, folks, I'm happy to say we've come a long way. While it took some time and cooperation, we now have robust channels of communication between our states and between our federal partners. Between the GCC, the EI-ISAC, the CIS, and a whole bowl full of acronym soup, our country's cybersecurity posture is actually stronger. We have opened up communication channels for our states, county, and local election officials to learn about emerging threats, improving situational awareness for all of us. Our partners at DHS and FBI, among others, have provided additional resources for which I am very grateful. I'm proud of the work we've done in Vermont. We have a state-mandated paper ballots. We have a state-mandated post-election audit. We do a daily backup of our voter registration database. We have Election Day registration. Our tabulators are not connected to the internet in any way. We have two-factor authentication for access to our election management system. We have firewalls in front of every one of our doors. We do weekly DHS cyber scans and have been since 2016. And we also do Secure the Human cyber training for our local town clerks who administer our elections in Vermont. Nationally, Secretary of States are focused on protecting and securing the integrity of our elections. The 2018 HAVA funding appropriated by Congress has been helpful in this critical work. And certainly the most recently appropriated funding will further allow states to make important decisions and investments in our election infrastructure. However, I must add, one-time lump sum funds every so often is helpful, but we need more than that. We actually need to have some kind of annual, sustainable, and dedicated funding. The mantra I've been repeating, which I co-opted from my colleague, Minnesota Secretary of State, Steve Simon, cybersecurity is a race without a finish line. It's ongoing, it's our new normal. An anecdote I always like to share, because I remember talking with several members of Congress about why we needed more money, and they said, "You haven't even spent the money we gave you last year." My only response was, well, you allowed us 5 years to spend that money. And by the way, we submitted our plans to the EAC, which the EAC has up on their website for everybody to see. The procurement process also in every state is different. We don't want to be foolishly spending that money. We want to make sure that the money that we spend is going to be useful and is going to be targeted. The concern that we have is that there was too much, because the money came to us late in 2018, people thought we were going to have time to spend all that money prior to the November election. I would bet you that not much of it was spent. In fact, I think it was only about 15% by that time. And no jokes aside, but it's not like we can walk into Best Buy and say, I'll take 200 of those off the shelf. We have to go through processes. In some cases, we have to go to our legislatures and get statute changes in order to spend that money. In Vermont, we used our money to do additional risk and vulnerability assessments, pen tests. We added two-factor authentication for anybody that accesses our EMS. And we added a fully ADA-compliant accessibility voting system that allows anybody with any disability to vote privately and independently. I think we were one of the first using this new system from Democracy Live. It better enables all voters, including voters with visual impairment, which is the federal mandate, or with a physical disability or mobility restriction to vote, again, privately and independently, and it produces a ballot that is indistinguishable from the ballot that anybody else uses. So that's a quick snapshot of what we've done, and I want to thank you all for your time and the important work you're doing, and with that, I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you, Secretary Condos. Now let me welcome Secretary Kyle Ardoin. Secretary Ardoin was elected as Louisiana Secretary of State in December 2018, serving as the first Assistant Secretary of State in that office since 2010. Secretary Ardoin is the treasurer of the National Association of Secretaries of State. So thank you and welcome to Secretary Ardoin.
I know you're all waiting for this. Go Tigers. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased to be here with you all. And yesterday was a very exciting day for all of Louisiana. Not only did our Tigers win the national championship, but all of our statewide officers were inaugurated yesterday as well. I left Louisiana from rain and came to D.C. in rain. So I feel right at home. Thank you all for having this summit. Let me start off by saying election security is not a Democratic ideal. It's not a Republican ideal. It's an American ideal and an issue that we all have to embrace. And I'm proud to be a part of an organization like NAS who embraces all opportunities to learn from one another, to find solutions to keep our elections secure. I suppose if I was at this meeting in January of 2016, our conversation surrounding election security would be much more subdued, and the threat of interference would be downplayed. Unfortunately, that is not the case. It took us all by surprise, and as Secretary Condos referred to, the Secretary Johnson's creation of the election infrastructure was pretty quick and took us all aback because we weren't sure of what we were facing or where we were headed or even what the details were. But when you fast forward to 2019, the year had highs and lows. It presented quite a few challenges for our agency, and we were able to rise up and tackle those issues. And we're excited and looking forward to the challenges of 2020 to provide security to our elections, but most of all, the confidence of our system to the people of Louisiana, just as any secretary around the country is trying to do for the people. We just finished a successful election cycle for our gubernatorial election and all the way down the ballot, including my election. We saw early voting utilized more than ever before in the state of Louisiana. In 2016, we had 531,000 plus early votes cast. In its entirety, in the 2019 gubernatorial election, we saw over 890,000 early votes cast. People are voting, and that's a good thing. Louisiana is facing an issue of which we have to replace our technology at the ballot box. We are focusing on a request for proposals process, which is not solely in the hands of the Secretary of State's office, but also requires assistance from the governor's administration. Louisiana is facing what other states are facing. Our local governments in the last 2 years have been attacked by ransomware attacks that were never seen before. Local governments are having difficulty facing these issues because of funding. That's no different than the Secretary of State's office and our elections issues. Prevention is most important in this process, but prevention requires money. We're very thankful for the Congress to provide the last sum of money. Louisiana stands to gain $6.6 million with a $1.3 million match. However, Louisiana, just in this fiscal year alone, faced $1.3 million in new costs, unforeseen costs, to protect our election registration systems and our voting systems. Elections are no longer a thing of small incremental increases in funding, but something that is going to be a constant need for new ways of funding elections. Elections is no longer just voting at the ballot box. It is about security, strong security. I'm pleased to say that the governor of Louisiana saw fit to place the Secretary of State as a primary member of the Cybersecurity Commission. It is in that role that I've been able to educate the Louisiana National Guard, our Cyber Innovation Center, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and other state partners and federal partners of how we perform our elections. It is that educational process that has brought them to the table. One of the most important things that I found in last year's election is the partnership that we can create with our local National Guard that brought the National Guard officers into our system and shadowed my very own employees, including my Commissioner of Elections. They wanted to be prepared for 2020, and my message to them was, you have to be prepared for 2019 before you can be prepared for 2020, and you have to be prepared for 2020 before you can prepare for 2021, and it's ongoing. It is never going to stop. And when our local governing systems, our local towns, our cities, our parishes, your counties, when they are at risk, we are all at risk. We spent in $1.3 million just helping to secure the Registrar of Voters offices and the Clerks of Court offices in the parishes all across Louisiana to protect them, but most importantly, to protect our system. If state government is going to have to come up with more and more state dollars, unforeseen dollars to buy equipment for locals, to secure lines for locals, to train locals on the risk of cybersecurity intrusions, then we have a long way to go because that money just does not grow on trees. We are very grateful to Congress for the first $5.8 million that we received 2 years ago and now the $6.6 million. All of those dollars are dedicated to upgrading our election infrastructure and bringing in new voting machines for our state. We are trying to replace machines that date back to 1995. Now, the good news about that 1995 equipment, it's so old no one even knows how to hack it. But my message to Congress is, we appreciate it. We appreciate you not putting strings attached to those dollars because every state is different. The needs for us to secure our elections, to upgrade technology, and to continue to bring democracy to the people of each and every state in this nation is important. And when you allow us to innovate, we're going to do it the right way. I'm asking for another $1.5 million in identified issues in our state from our state government. Another 1.5 on top of the 1.3 we didn't have to spend this fiscal year. I'm proud to be working with so many wonderful secretaries across the state, across this country. I'm proud to be working with the congressional members in our delegation and in educating them of the issues. And more importantly, it is important to educate the members of the legislature of the intricacies of putting on an election. Until you stand in our shoes as election officials in this great country, you do not realize the depth and the breadth that it takes to put on elections. And may I say to all in this audience and watching live streaming, there is no safety net for a state election official. The election is either right or it's not. It's either fair or it's not. We don't have room for error. And so we are constantly being vigilant on every aspect of election security, technological upgrades, and every opportunity to make certain that our systems are protected. I appreciate everyone in this room who chooses to be a partner with each and every state official, because that's what it takes. We have plenty of critics in our country, but it takes partners to build an election system that the American people can be proud of and can have confidence in. Each state is different. Each county or parish is different. But the bottom line is we have to have the confidence of the public in order for our elections and our democracy to continue. I thank the EAC for being a strong partner with us, providing us with solutions, providing us with coordination of opportunities to educate both the public and other election officials on the local level. Without them, without this cooperation, we only stand to lose ground. As Secretary Condos said, it's a moving target every time we open our eyes. And we have to always hope that we are one step ahead. And I'll end on this. This is how simple an issue can become. In this last gubernatorial election, the governor was in a runoff, and I was in a runoff. There were 40,000 undervotes in my race. The governor won his race by about 40,000 votes. Can you imagine what the conspiracy theorists were thinking? That wasn't the case, because we promoted day in and day out how important our system was, all the steps we took to protect this election and every election we have. No other place in government is there so much transparency than in elections. And that's what we as Secretaries of State have to continue to fight for while we're fighting to protect our systems, is transparency to the public so the public has confidence in our elections. I am proud to be the Secretary of State of the state of Louisiana. I'm proud to be a member of the National Association of Secretaries of State because we are all working for the common good, and that is to protect our democracy. Thank you, EAC. Christy, thank you for all your hard work and the other members of the commission. I look forward to continued cooperation and coordination of all efforts to protect our democracy. God bless the great, I was going to say, God bless the great state of Louisiana, and I mean that. God bless the Tigers, which he did, and God bless the United States.
Thank you, Secretary Ardoin, and I want to thank both Secretaries Condos and Ardoin for being here with us today. We appreciate your remarks and your insight. It's very important for us to hear from you.